by the airport, so I have a feeling I'm going to be here later this evening, so hanging out. All right, so reminder that Saturday is the back to school hike with the Brandeis Hiking Club. Red River Gorge going to meet out at the Summit Shopping Center, which is also called the Paddock Shops now, at 7:30 in the morning. Carpool out there and so forth. All the hikes will be easy but pretty, so that'll so it's not going to be any like you have to have hiked the Appalachian Trail in order to be able to do this or anything like that. So the announcements on both the Brandeis Hiking Club site and the SBA site. So if you're interested, you can give some indication that you might be thinking about coming, so that we know to expect you. That would be awesome. But otherwise, show up, and I hope many of you can do that. But it's totally just fun or something to do on a Saturday early in the semester, and it's very nice out there. So yeah. And environmental field study. Okay, no, not everybody in this class is in environmental field study, but if you are, just a reminder that we're going to be down at the Louisville Boathouse by 9 a.m. or earlier on Friday to canoe the Ohio River and Beargrass Creek and hear from expert speakers about a lot of the water pollution issues in streams, urban streams like Beargrass Creek, so especially degraded, but also in the Ohio River and the Mississippi River Basin generally. So, which of course is where we're eventually going to go in terms of our second problem of the semester. And a reminder that you will need to bring, or when you're there, sign the release for the River City Paddle Sports company that's hosting us and so forth, and just come prepared for, we're going to be out on the water for a while, so, the usual, sunscreen hat, comfortable, possibly, there can be some water as we canoe that gets, put your phone in something that's not going to get wet. Don't bring your copy of the original of the U.S. Constitution or something with you on the boat. It doesn't have to do that. So, questions? They are large canoes. So I don't remember exactly 10, 12, 13, something like that. They're big canoes. So what that means is because it's a team effort to paddle, it doesn't mean that anybody has to be an amazing canoer or kayaker or anything like that, because we're all going. And where we start out, usually how it goes is we're kind of in the protected channel between the island and the boathouse up to Beargrass Creek, and then it's usually when we're coming out and going downriver, so the current works with us, that we get out there and battle it out with the coal barges and that kind of stuff. Questions? Don't need that. Okay, for those who are in the environmental field study, one more indulgence about this particular class, because it's only 4 class meetings, and if you miss one entire class plus a minute of any other class, then the university is going to withdraw you from the course, because there are these ABA standards about attendance and so forth. So I am offering a kind of a absent offset. Makeup's probably not really the right word. It's really more of an offset for an absence on the 30th, and that is the Friday in which Labor Day weekend starts. But hey, we can't have everything. But that's kayaking Harris Creek. So again, in the morning. So if you've got Labor Day plans, you can go from there. But I would encourage everyone in the class to take advantage of it, because you never know when things come up in the semester, and it'd be a shame to get partway into the class and then have the law school university withdraw you from the class because you've missed too many minutes. Okay, so that's just the nature of having a field study class. It's just 4 class meetings. So that we now have a 5th opportunity if you're interested. But I will need to know by this coming Monday at noon, and the cost is, it was in the email, it's like $35 or something like that is the cost. If you have your own kayak, you can always let me know that, and I think they'll accommodate people who have their own kayak coming and joining us and launching from their site. But anyway, so questions? All right, so perspectives assignments. So I have read all of them, and I was very impressed. I thought they were all very good, so I'm actually just going to announce, as just to try to get to the most efficient way, is that everyone who turned in one on time has 5 points. So just there you go. All right. So because I thought they were all very good, I will email a group of I think there's 7 who were sort of who had exceptional answers, and so there will be 7 people in this class who will hear from me that just I think you ought to know that yours was particularly exceptional. If you do not hear from me, do not say, oh my gosh, I didn't hear from Professor Orwell, my perspective assignments suck. No, it's that I wouldn't give you 5. Okay, yes, I won't give you 5 points for something that was awful, right? No, it's that everybody did a good job. It's just that a handful of people had some especially keen insights. Okay, but you're getting started on environmental law, so if you didn't have especially keen insights yet, you had excellent insights, and you will have perhaps by the end of the semester especially keen insights. I did want to talk a little bit about the 4 perspectives and identify some things that folks talked about, and not everybody talked about, and so I just want to call your attention to some things that you might want to think about. So for example, in terms of environmental rights, the question is, what rights are we talking about? And this actually is not a matter of civil rights. Civil rights are usually what we call negative rights, which are rights to not have the government interfere with something, with your free speech, to not have the government discriminate against you for illegitimate purposes or that kind of thing. Okay, not to interfere with your voting rights, etc. Okay, so environmental rights are usually classified in the category of human rights, rights that come from being a human, that are positive rights. The right to clean water, for example, the right to a clean environment. There are some procedural rights, right to participate, that can be out there as well, and so forth. But generally, when we're talking about clean water, we're talking about something that's a positive human right. And positive meaning the right to have something, or receive something. And the question is then, who has the duty? Is it the government? Is it society? Right? And that raises some questions. I mean, how do we deal with that, especially if it's not always the government that's actually providing the resource. So for example, if you live in Lexington, water is provided by a private company that is the water provider in Lexington. So do human rights apply to, do they have duties to provide clean water and so forth? So that's out there And human rights can be sort of really fundamental to just existence as a human being. They can be founded in international instruments, international legal instruments. So probably the very strongest or best or most robust right to water appears in a set of international instruments, of which many of them, not all of them, but for many of them, the U.S. actually is a signatory, but pretty much doesn't find, the U.S. doesn't believe it is bound. It is required to provide everybody with a certain amount of free and clean drinking water. So that's kind of an interesting phenomenon, and we haven't really seen how that plays out. So could you end up with litigation in international courts over it? That's interesting. We'll sort of see over time how that plays out. Sort of more generally, so we've got sort of just fundamentally, this is just the nature of how it is. Then we've got international agreements. Then we can have constitutional rights, rights that are guaranteed as part of the Constitution. Most of our rights under the Constitution are really negative rights. They're more in the realm of civil rights, that we have the right for the government not to interfere with our free exercise of religion, not to interfere with our free speech, not to seize our property without some sort of just cause, without to not be forced to testify against ourselves, et cetera, right? And so, but as you saw in the reading, there are a handful of states that have in their state constitutions a right to a clean and healthy environment, and then the question is, what's that mean, and how is it enforced? Then, beyond that, we have more biocentric or ecocentric rights. It's a whole idea. This is more philosophical. You have some nations out there that have recognized the legal personhood of waterways, of rivers and streams and so forth. So New Zealand is one, India is one, there's another country, I can't remember what it is, but this has become a more recent thing, and it has been a way in which the courts have recognized that the waterways themselves have certain legal protections that are going to be recognized just on the basis of the fact that they are rivers or waterways. So that's very interesting. But for the most part, again, in the United States, non-humans do not have rights. Okay? It's a very interesting article. We'll talk about it later. But it was done back in the 1970s. Should trees have standing? It's a very cute title, right? Does trees have standing, right? And so, of course, because it's clever, it got picked up by law review editors. And so we're going to raise this question: who should speak for the non-human aspects of nature, right? And so it's an interesting legal question. And our system, our constitutional law system, by and large, non-human aspects of nature do not have legal rights, do not have legal standings. You will find some cases, and we will talk about them from time to time, or you'll see some reference to them, where the case name is in the name of a particular species, right? So, and I'm not thinking of one right off the top of my head, but there are several. But let's say the 10-toed salamander versus the United States. Okay? Now, that is because some federal district court has been particularly accommodating is the word I'm looking for, has been accommodating, but if you actually read the case, you read the complaint and so on and so forth, it's clear that there is some group of human beings who are being harmed as human beings who are bringing the lawsuit. In other words, the standing to bring the lawsuit is in a group of human beings, not in the 10-toed salamander. Okay, so you never see that. So don't get carried away just because you see a case name that's styled like that. It's interesting, it grabs people's attention, but it is not like how New Zealand recognizes that the river has a particular legal standing in and of itself. It's a different phenomenon. Okay? So one of the things I just want to point out about environmental rights is that there are issues not only with who has the rights, what's the nature of the rights, who owes the duties, but also how the rights are actually enforced. It's one thing to pronounce that there are rights, it's another thing to have mechanisms for enforcement. And so that's something that you might sort of wrestle with. The Safe Drinking Water Act imposes duties on providers of water. It creates a set of authority for the federal government to regulate and the states to regulate, and he's going to impose a number of restrictions on private water providers, and he's going to provide some opportunities, some authority for citizens who are adversely affected to bring a lawsuit, but it does not really by itself create a statutory right to clean water, okay? Just on the face of it. Now, whether it should or shouldn't, perhaps should be interpreted that way, but so that's an interesting question about what it should be, but just in terms of what it actually is, it is not technically a source of a clean water right in and of itself. Okay? But there again, there are some rights to sue if the water isn't, if the water doesn't meet the standards. Okay? Sustainable development. Let's talk a little bit about sustainable development as a perspective. Here, the real question is, what kind of development could help Martin County be more economically sustainable and more environmentally sustainable? Right? That's sort of the bottom line. And that's really, I hope, several people really wrestle with this, but the reality of that is a tough question. Right? I hope everybody sort of saw that clearly there are some aspects of sort of coal dependence that are not sustainable in the long run. And I think, and by the way, I think that while that might be a politically controversial statement, I think you would find almost all coal companies would say that as a matter of sort of long-term economics, right? The long-term economics is they realize that over time that their extraction of coal is going to be shrinking because it is a finite resource, and eventually it's just going to become very expensive to get more and more of that out of there, right? And to get the last parts of it out of there. So that's an issue. And then obviously, in terms of environmental sustainability, the contaminated drinking water is just on its face not very sustainable for a population, especially a very poor population. And so how to somehow balance that, how to promote development in Martin County, we talked about that the other day, that's the really big question that people have ideas about, but nothing seems to have actually had traction. And so anyway, so sometimes when you're looking at things from a particular perspective, you might recognize the issues, but there might not be a clear, obvious, easy answer. Right? So that's one of the things to think about sustainable development. Utilitarianism and cost-benefit analysis. This is one where some people kind of got down to one aspect of this, which is, are the cost of bringing Martin County's water supply up to a reliable quantity, pressure, and quality, do they outweigh the cost of doing so? And so in other words, are the benefits enough to outweigh the cost? Because it's a small population, it's going to turn out to be very costly to get fix all the leaks, to get the supply up, the pressure up, and to improve the quality, right? And so at some level, we sort of think everybody ought to have clean drinking water, ought to have enough drinking water to satisfy basic needs and to should be clean. That kind of goes to environmental rights. But if it were to cost $900 trillion to do that, I mean, that's just where, if you're looking at it from the cost-benefit analysis, you say, is it worth the cost? So lurking behind this is an argument that's out there. It's not in the book, it's just something, actually a couple people really sort of wrestled with this, which I thought was really interesting, which is, what about low income or sort of places with sort of distressed economic activity with sparse populations? Should we even be letting people live there? Right? I mean, is that is there a basic sort of cost-benefit economic problem with having communities where you just can't efficiently or economically or feasibly provide all the various services? And my own, and I raised the question. My own personal view is that that's a very problematic argument, and for a lot of reasons. I think from a moral reason, and I think it's very biased. It sort of like says, well, if you live in the city where there are lots of things provided efficiently, you have a set of you have an infrastructure, and you're basically sort of saying, hey, people who live out in the rural areas shouldn't have it, right? And so, so I think it's problematic in a lot of ways, and yet, as lawyers, I also think that we have to recognize that this is an issue that comes up in cost-benefit analysis, right? I mean, that this is out there. And so I mean, it won't take you very long with a little bit of internet searching. New York Times has done articles on this, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, left, right, and otherwise. The media has wrestled with this issue about, how incredibly expensive it is to fix problems in rural America because of the low population density and the very spread out nature. In addition, there's another thing, which is rural America is actually a lot of different Americas, okay? So it's, right? So there are some ways in which rural America has things in common, but there's some ways in which situations in Martin County, Kentucky are maybe different than the colonias in South Texas near the U.S.-Mexico border, or the Central Valley in California where there's a lot of farming, and the sort of wilderness areas of Maine, and so on and so forth, right? I mean, so we talk about a lot of different areas. But part of the reason I bring this up is because this issue is exactly what was the subject of one of the papers, the works in progress, that I was assigned to comment on out in Santa Barbara right before classes started. So when I was out there for an environmental law scholars workshop, and what I was assigned was about basically, the author is sort of pushing back against this idea that rural America has a lot of unsolvable, intractable problems. I'm going to say we really need to invest in infrastructure in low-income rural communities, and here's why, so forth. But it does raise issues, and people around the table were sort of raising questions about, okay, but what is the cost-benefit analysis? At what point do you sort of say, what are the benefits we're getting for the money we're putting in? And that's just that's an issue that's out there. But then the flip side of that is one that I thought everybody did particularly well with. So I mean, obviously, the Martin County case resonates most with an environmental justice perspective, which is the inequalities or disparities in environmental conditions, and environmental harms and environmental benefits, right? And so obviously, Martin County is a low-income community, a community that is marginalized in a lot of ways by poverty, by geography, by unequal treatment. And I think I mentioned this before, but it sort of comes off of all of the others that we've been talking about. We have a number of policies in the U.S. that have a strong urban bias. So one of the things I did as a student was I wrote a paper in a seminar that ended up getting published in the Stanford Law and Policy Review called the Ignoring the Rural Underclass, the Biases of Federal Housing Policy. And it was basically about how all of our housing policy at the federal level was all envisioned urban housing. And there's an enormous low-income housing need in rural areas and small towns, and there's a tremendous supply problem, and there's a lot of ways in which you kind of get these multiple layers of inequality or injustice that are both geographic, have to do with these biases, but also have to do with poverty and how people get exploited in these situations and so forth. And so, that's obviously part of what's going on here with water in Martin County, and a lot of you guys really wrote about that very eloquently and extensively, and so that you can look at it from that way. Anyway, I just want to kind of raise these issues for you to think about, and to, we're going to, throughout the semester, kind of push on our ideas a little more and try to think a little bit more rigorously about the ways we're looking at these issues. Okay, questions? So now let's turn to problem number one. So I know we've been Martin County, but this is now our big sort of complex multi-dimensional problem, and we have a problem on grasslands and prairie dog conservation. So I just had lunch today with a student who took this class 2 years ago, loves this case study. I do occasionally get the Facebook comment from students who are traumatized about writing about prairie dogs for their final exam. So everybody reacts to these things differently. But this is pretty typical of these kind of big picture complex problems that arise in environmental law. Okay, so your role is what? What's your role here?
Assistant Director for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Okay, Assistant Director, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is in the which department? Interior, U.S. Department of the Interior. No, that has to be diplomatic. It has to be, okay, so the U.S. Department of the Interior is a federal department, so it counts as a federal agency, but the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is a federal agency within the U.S. Department of the Interior. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has responsibility for implementation and enforcement of most of the Endangered Species Act. Hold on just a second, I've got chatty people out here. Sorry. But they also manage national wildlife refuges and implement and enforce a variety of other federal laws and programs, funding, et cetera, that has to do with basically fish and wildlife. one of the things we're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about is just basically administrative law and the regulatory structure, how the federal government is set up, and then to some degree, not as much, but to some degree, we'll talk about, does this sort of play out at state and local levels as well? How does that work? But we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about federal agencies and what roles they play and what are the legal authorities and limitations on what agencies can do. And so we'll spend more time on that as we go. The U.S. Department of Interior is one of only, it's only one of a whole bunch of different federal departments that have something to do with the environment. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is another one. But lots of agencies. The U.S. Department of Commerce is where NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is. You've got marine fisheries, and so on and so forth. Jimmy mentioned the State Department, and you said, well, wait, no, they're the diplomats and so forth. Nonetheless, you will find a whole variety of environmental issues that the State Department has to deal with, in part because the U.S. is part of some international issues, international cooperation, and so forth on environmental issues. So everything from migratory birds to funding of development in other countries that's going to have environmental impacts, and so forth. Okay? And climate change. Okay? So, who actually is sitting down at the table with representatives from other nations over these sort of climate change agreements? Well, to some degree, that's not solely people from the U.S. State Department, but includes people from the State Department. Right? And so, we can keep going on. Transportation, our highways and roads go through environmental areas. Anybody know which agency oversees protection of wetlands? Wetlands.
National Resources Conservation?
No. That is another agency, which actually is in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, that deals with sort of sustainable farming practices and funding to help farmers do that. Okay. No, Ethan knows. Wetlands. What agency oversees wetlands?
I represent them in the West Coast.
Yes. Yes, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Okay, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Okay, a happenstance of the fact that the U.S. Army was the entity that dealt with various waterworks. That long before there was actually a separate Navy, a separate Air Force, and before there were airplanes and so on and so forth. So all the way back from the very beginning of our nation's history, the Army had a corps of engineers that was designed to build things, build roads, but among other things, it was designed to build harbors and marinas and channels for waterways. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built the McAlpine Lock and Dams right here at the Ohio River, right? Right where we go over the Falls of the Ohio, right? The only way that the boats can do that is because the Army Corps of Engineers built these lock and dams structures, right? Okay, so they they oversee protection of the wetlands because it's part of navigable waters. Okay, so that's part of, and now they share their power with the EPA. We'll get to that and so forth. But anyway, so the point here is that there are lots of different kinds of federal agencies within the U.S. Department of the Interior. The National Park Service is an agency within the Department of the Interior that is distinct from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Okay? And the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, is another entity within the U.S. Department of the Interior. And so they all have different responsibilities under the law, and the law defines these agencies and so forth. So one of the things that we're going to talk about later are things like that are called organic acts. These are acts enacted by Congress to create certain designations of lands or certain agencies that with certain responsibilities. Okay, so that gives us some sense of what's going on. And we'll talk about what issues that raises in just a moment. Your role, okay? So your role here is not just as a lawyer, but you are an assistant director, and you bring your legal skills, but you also have management responsibilities and policy responsibilities and so forth. Okay? This is not at all uncommon. I have former students who have had positions of authority like this in federal agencies. I have colleagues from professors who teach at other law schools, and they go and they do a stint in one administration or another, and they may do solely legal work. They may be, for example, one of my friends was the solicitor of the U.S. Department of Interior, which means the lawyer for the entire department. Another friend who was the Assistant Attorney General of the United States for Environmental and Natural Resources Division. Okay? So those are the litigators. Solicitor is the lawyer, sort of like the in-house lawyer, and so forth. But I have, I know friends and people I don't even know, but people who do this who bring their legal backgrounds to policy and management positions within these agencies. And part of what I'm hoping will come out of this class is that you will have multidimensional skills where you can, in your career, do either kind of role. So a more traditional lawyering role, or you can do something more broader with more of a policy or management role. Okay, so that's part of what this problem is designed to introduce you to. All right. So you see, there's a lot of context, a lot of factual information. It's a little bit of a scenario, so to speak. It sort of tells a story and so forth. And some of that's designed to give you a real-world feel. I will say, just this is a kind of an aside, but I thought it was personally cool. So I sort of set this on Ted Turner's ranch in South Dakota. All of this information about the ranch is factually accurate. Okay, so it's and this is actually a significant thing when you're talking about ecosystem conservation or land conservation in the United States. Ted Turner is one of the major private landowners. Okay, so at one time he was owned the most private land for conservation purposes in the United States. I don't think that's true anymore, but he's still up there, right? I mean, still in the top 10 probably or something. But anyway, everybody know who Ted Turner is? Yes? Yeah, okay. So, all right. So I served for several years on the Board of Trustees of the Nature Conservancy's Kentucky chapter. During the last couple of years, I was on the board. His daughter, who lives over kind of in bluegrass country near Lexington, Versailles kind of area, was on the board with me. So, I mean, Okay, she's the daughter of Ted Turner. Well, of course, she'd be on the Nature Conservancy Kentucky chapter's board. And so we had a a few years ago, the Kentucky chapter celebrated its 40th anniversary. Nature Conservancy's been around a lot longer, but the Kentucky chapter celebrated its 40th anniversary at Woodford Reserve. And the guest, the star guest and guest speaker for dinner was Ted Turner. And so, so I drive out there, I show up. And the first thing he does is compliments my Stetson and my cowboy boots. And I thought, wow, this is very cool. So, I mean, we like environmental conservation, but if you can get a compliment from Ted Turner, who's also a Stetson and boot wearer, okay. So I got to put in the this is not at all untypical, right? This is exactly what you would be doing if you were an assistant director and you're out there on his ranch trying to kind of get a handle on what? On what's the problem? What problem are you wrestling with? How would you define or frame the problem? Let me take a stab.
You want to develop plans and regulations to protect several species of prairie dogs.
Okay, so your problem is, hey, I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I'm sitting around, and what I really want to do is develop some plans and regulations, right? Is that is that the problem? Okay, let me start with, that's something this would be a part of this, but is that your problem? Is that the problem? Is developing plans and regulations?
I guess the bigger problem is like the destruction of the prairies that the prairie dogs live in.
Okay, so destruction of the prairies, that then adversely affects the prairie dogs that live in the prairies, right? Okay, so good. Okay, what else?
The fact that you're trying to say an animal that's a pest to most people, and that you have a lot of state regulations that actually allow farmers to kill prairie dogs, so that you're trying to save them because they are a keystone member of the ecological system, of the ecosystem, basically. So you need to save all the other creatures.
Okay, so how to save the prairie dog as a keystone species? I'm going to actually in just a moment what that's about. But how to save the prairie dog as a keystone species when so many people view the prairie dog as a pest? That's another way of framing the problem. But when we say keystone, what do we mean?
So a keystone species has like a substantial effect on a lot of other different kinds of living and non-living species of plants and animals in the environment that it occupies.
Okay, so that particular species has a lot of effect on other species in its environment. Okay, so both wildlife and plant. Okay, what else? Other thoughts about keystone species? A couple other things. One is that the health of the species affects the health of the entire system. And what do we call it? When we talk about the system, we're calling it a what? Ecosystem, right? An ecosystem. Okay, so the health of the species affects the health of the ecosystem, and the health of the species is an indicator of the health of the ecosystem. Okay, so you see both ways. Right? So the species affects the health of the ecosystem, but also we can know a whole lot about the health of the ecosystem by looking at the health of the species. Right? Does everybody see why I start thinking about both of this? All right, good. So so we've got prairie dog conservation, right? We've got the tensions between goals or values regarding the prairie dogs themselves. We've got some concerns for the prairies as ecosystems, right? What else?
Residents in that area tend to be very anti-federal government, especially when it comes to regulation on private property.
Okay, good. So now what we have is not only is our problem about prairies as ecosystems, not only is our problem about prairie dogs as a species and a keystone species in particular, but our problem is also about, including the conflicting values over the prairie dog. But I don't know if we have conflicting values of the prairies. We haven't talked about that, so let's put it up there. But we have conflicting values over the role of the federal government, right? So that's a problem as well. Okay. What else?
And looking specifically at the grasslands, like human, suppression of natural occurrences like wildfires and we've mentioned other things, but like drought also have negatively impacted the prairie lands because they're not, being eroded as they normally would, or the intervention is not helping.
Okay, good. So we've talked about framing this in a more positive way about the conservation of the prairies. We can also frame it in a more negative way of having to deal with all of the various human harms to the prairies as ecosystems, right? The destruction, the change in how we manage them, the development, all of those sorts of things, right? So does everybody see you can kind of look at it, our goal is, or the problem is about how to conserve the prairies, but we can also sort of say, well, the goal is the problem is how do we deal with a whole variety of human harms. And one thing I want to pull out of what Olivia said here is multiple sources of harms, right? Multiple sources of harm. Okay, so if we say that about the prairies, we say that about prairie dogs as well. Right? We talked about the need to conserve the prairie dogs as a keystone species, but we also can talk about the problem being a whole set of harms. Okay, a whole set of harms to the prairie dogs. With both of these, both prairies and prairie dogs, we can talk about specific harms: loss of habitat, loss of acreage, decreasing populations. Right? Specific harms. Some other specific harms to the prairie dogs include what?
Extinction?
Yeah, extinction possibly, but they're not extinct yet. But what specific harms occur? Plague, poison, and shooting, right? Like poison shooting, big three, right? Okay. So those are some very specific harms. And so somebody mentioned extinction. Well, we can talk about the harms in and of themselves, but we don't actually really have the extinction of the prairie dogs, and we don't have the total extinction of grasslands, right? But we have harms to them, we have reduction in them, and that leads to another layer of problems, which is vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities, right? So both the prairies and the prairie dogs are highly vulnerable, and that's more. That's a big there's a bigger picture way of looking at it when we think of prairies as systems, as ecosystems, and when we think about prairie dogs as populations of species. Okay, so that's another way of defining the problem. the other thing that's out there to sort of think about in terms of the problem is about fragmentation. Okay, so we have the lands being all fragmented, right? We have the habitat of the prairie dogs and where they are being fragmented, and we also have control over both being fragmented. Public versus private, different federal agencies, federal, state, local, right? Lots of different fragmentation. Why is that a problem?
Well, if it's being controlled by different people, it's harder to make rules that are going to be followed by everyone.
Right, harder to have sort of integrated, systematic solutions. These are systems, and yet they're all treated very fragmented, in very fragmented ways, very divided out and so on and so forth. Okay, so what I'm getting at here is there are a number of different ways to define the problem, but some of the things that we see is that both prairies and prairie dogs seem to be a part of this, right? Both environment, or ecosystem, just environmental conditions, the social conditions and values and attitudes, and the institutions, right? Different agencies, different authorities, who controls it, are all at issue, right? The question is, how do we come up with some solutions that are more integrated, that treat the entire problem rather than just pieces of it? So one of the things about defining the problem is trying to define the client's goals. So what does the client want to achieve here? So once again, our client is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, okay? That's going to be important to keep in mind. As we go through these, we're going to switch around to different types of clients for different types of problems. But whatever your personal inclination is in terms of, what kind of client you want to work for, if you have a particular client, then, that's who you're representing. So then, so next time around, we're going to do the Kentucky Farm Bureau and people who are actually really polluting the environment. And then in the last one, we're going to deal more with a local grassroots environmental group, public interest group. But right now, we're representing a federal agency, okay? So we need to keep that in mind, right? And so what does our client want?
Ideas for possible solutions for grassland and prairie dog conservation?
Okay, so one of the things the client wants is ideas for solutions, right? Okay, good. What else?
And just for the fact that the federal government needs to be cost effective though for it to ever be able to pass any point, so.
Right? Cost effective? Okay, so there's time sensitivity, there's an urgency to this, and conservation is a big part. Okay, so this is not, this is an agency that has a different set of goals than, like build some freeways through it. That would be a different agency, or do some missile testing out in the grasslands. That would be a different agency. The Fish and Wildlife Service has a set of conservation goals. There's a set of urgency about those. Okay. As a federal agency, though, they are subject to
Oversight?
what's that?
Oversight?
Oversight by whom? Congress. Okay, and President. Okay, so that means that the agency is inherently subject to. Let me say it.
Bureaucracy?
So, well, they are bureaucracy. Politics, okay? Don't run away from it. Address it, okay? So this is a law class, but many of the legal issues in environmental law arise because the agencies that are given the responsibility for and duty to and authority to protect the environment or manage the environment are subject to politics, okay? Subject to politics. And so we're going to talk a fair amount about that in this course, okay? But you have to be aware of that. Okay, so if you are the assistant director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service right now, in the current administration, how likely is it, do you think, that you are going to go very far in addressing prairie dogs and prairie conservation by starting out framing this as a fundamental problem of development and climate change? Okay, that is not right. People are going, okay, the politics of that right now are not going to take you very far, right? You're going to get pushback from above. You're going to get pushback, whether it's the secretary of the Department of Interior, whether it's the president, right? Whether it's going to be certain forces in Congress that don't want to hear that, right? Okay, yeah, you're going to get some support for that, right? I mean, that's also out there. But if you are in this role, it does not mean that there will be no consideration or support for prairie conservation or prairie dogs, but you're certainly going to have to frame it in a way that is politically feasible, right? Does everybody see that? Okay, and now we're at the point where you're having to figure out how that works with the law, right? And so people who are not lawyers, who are totally in the political realm, have to deal with legal requirements and legal authority and legal limitations and all that kind of stuff. But what I'm saying is you, with your law degree, are also going to have to deal with political requirements, political limitations, political realities. Okay? And so what do you think that means in terms of the goals for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and this kind of thing? We're going to talk later in the course about the ways in which there's change going on with respect to environmental law, but it is not the case. It would be a mistake to get carried away and think that all the federal agencies have just abandoned all of their conservation goals. That is not true. That's just not the reality. There are still things that go on every day in the federal government that are conservation oriented. Okay? Now, I'm not saying everything. I'm not saying all the decisions that you come before them. But it's not the case that the agencies have completely switched their missions and so forth. Right? It's more mixed picture now. Okay, so I don't think you need to say, hey, okay, if I'm the assistant director in the current administration, my goal now is, drive the prairie dog to extinction, develop the grasslands. I don't think that's going to be the goal, okay? I don't think that. You still have a set of goals, but what do you want to have happen? How do you want it to happen? What's going to be the most politically workable way to get there? What has to happen with the conservation in order for you to get authority and resources to move forward?
It has to be affordable.
Affordable, okay?
Yeah, similarly, I think it's economic development.
Okay, all right.
Everybody support for your position?
Yes, okay, so the big one is cooperation, right? You want this to be a more collaborative approach than a more top-down regulatory approach. Okay, right now, okay? And there will be other administrations and other times that will be more sort of, hey, we're going to impose this, we're going to, this is, cooperation isn't getting us far enough, we've got to be more regulatory. But I think right now, you would say collaboration and cooperation is an important part of this. Having said that, I want to be super clear that those were primary or important goals in both the Clinton and Obama administrations as well as the both Bushes and Reagan, okay? And after that, before that, I was 2 months ago. Okay, right? So what I'm saying is, okay, there has never been a time in recent history where a federal agency has been uninterested in collaboration and cooperation. Okay, that's always a politically useful thing for an agency, right? Because what are you doing? You're getting more and more interest groups on board in support of what you're doing, in support of your authority, in support of the administration you work for, and so on and so forth, and in support of your agency getting resources. Okay, so that's an important way to think about it. All right, and just to give you, so that we kind of put this in context here, early, I'm trying to remember exactly when it was, but okay, so this was when it's been in the Trump administration, but it was after the House went Republican, okay, right, before it went back Democrat, okay? There was a Republican representative from Utah that proposed divesting the federal government of a lot of its public lands, okay? National wildlife refuges, and I mean, it went all of it, but there's a whole bunch of them identified, a whole bunch of different public lands that were identified to be sold to private developers, private oil companies, and so on and so forth. Okay, anybody follow that, see the politics of why that proposal, despite having Republicans in the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, that proposal totally crashed and burned. The congressman came out publicly and said, I screwed this up, I will never introduce that piece of legislation ever again, I'm so sorry, please don't vote me out of office. Okay, and he did that because who showed up? Who showed up to say, this is a terrible idea? Anybody? Should we think through the possibilities? I mean, lots of environmental groups did, but I mean, that wasn't exactly the congressman's constituency. Who was the congressman's constituency that was radically opposed to this? An outrage.
Is this the barriers thing?
No, barriers is a whole, that's a whole, that's got whole layers of other issues associated with it. Yeah.
Did anything do like public grazing lands or something like that?
Well, public grazing lands were possibly among the things that could be divested. There's a whole bunch of different lands. But which interest group? Anybody pay attention to see this? Think through the possibilities?
Could have been an agency that was favorable towards hunting.
Okay, it was sportsmen. Okay, it was sportsmen. People who hunt and fish. And I'm actually looking for a more gender-neutral term, but it was sports people, right? People who hunt and fish, right? Okay, so, I mean, like crazy. I mean, and these are people who, many of them often vote Republican, right? Many of them have strong sort of Second Amendment viewpoints and other sorts of things, but they were adamantly opposed to the federal government giving away or selling their public lands, our public lands, on which they hunt and fish. Right? Does everybody see? Okay, so part of what I'm trying to get across here is you need to think in a more sophisticated, nuanced way about the politics here, right? It is not just, hey, there's an oil company, and hey, there's an environmentalist, and they're going to battle it out, and this administration doesn't like one, that administration doesn't like that. Okay, that's part of it, but that's not all of it, right? So just to sort of think about politics. So, again, come back to the client's goals. Multi-stakeholder collaboration or cooperation is a key goal. It's not the only goal. There's conservation goals. We want the grasslands to be healthy and well-functioning. We want the prairie dogs to thrive, in some sort of solution that all the parties can live with. But when you're talking about the agency, that's an important part of it. And I'll emphasize this time and again. But agencies, they want love, political love. Okay, so they're right. They want to be liked. Honestly, they want support. Okay, from various interest groups. They want money and they want power. Okay? That's how federal agencies. That's how any government agency operates, because that's how they sustain their mission, that's how they do things, that's how they evaluate whether they're being successful or not. I mean, one agency wants to have its entire budget cut, have no power, and be hated by everybody, right? I mean, seriously, just think about it, okay? So that's a big part of how this works. So what does that mean in terms of the issues here? We've identified a lot of them, but what would we say are the issues? There's a bunch. Just toss them out.
Having prairie dogs on your land, diminish the value for some farm when you have prairie dogs.
Okay, so private property owners don't like the prairie dogs. They affect their value, they affect how they use the land, okay? And it affects the role that the federal government is going to play with respect to their land, okay? So private property owners do not like the prairie dogs. What else?
Private property owners generally distrust the federal government anyway.
Okay, distrust by local residents and private property owners and others of the federal government, okay? That is a big issue. What else?
Further diminishing of prairie dog population is going to impact our grasslands.
Okay, so the more that we lose the prairie dogs, the less healthy our grasslands are, the more we possibly will lose the grasslands themselves, okay? So, yeah, so that basic sort of keystone species idea. Yeah.
People think of carry on disease.
Okay, so fear of the disease that goes with them. So that kind of goes beyond just property owners and how they get to use their land and the value of their land. It's a more broader public fear. Okay, good?
So like loss of prairie dogs is still soil erosion, which also leads to the farmlands that don't have prairie dogs getting there.
Okay, so there's actually, though, an interconnectedness among the prairies as ecosystems, the prairie dogs as species, and farmland conservation and farmland productivity. Okay, so there's ways in which the prairie dogs hurt the farms with all the holes, horses and cattle and so forth breaking their legs, and it does happen. It's a reality. But then there's also the ways in which soil erosion is a major problem, and prairie dogs play a role, and the actual conservation of the prairies as a system helps to conserve the soils. Okay, all right. What else?
Conflicting regulatory goals.
Okay, conflicting regulatory goals, big problem. Okay, and what's one of the sort of biggest sources of regulation that's going on right here in this issue, in this particular problem? Right.
That the Utah prairie dogs are actually marked as endangered, but they refuse to list any of the others.
Okay, so a big issue has to do with the listing of prairie dogs as endangered under the Endangered Species Act. And so we have tension over one that is listed, and then we have also some disagreements about whether the others should be listed or not. So we have different species. As you see in the reading, there's 5 different species, and so there's some tension there. Okay, good. What else? The big issue, broader issue, is just balancing human needs and ecological needs, right? And they're interconnected. I mean, the effects on soil erosion is an example of how they're interconnected, but then there are also tensions between those, right? I mean, so if we want to see more land development, more oil and gas development, more farming and that kind of thing, it may mean that we see less and less in the way of grasslands. I mean, that's been our history, right? You saw how much the grasslands have shrunk, the prairies have shrunk in our history, and we've turned them into other things and so forth. And so that's a tension there as well. Okay? I think another issue, and we talked about a goal, is to get cooperation, but how are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? And we talked about property owner and sort of industry and economic sector attitudes, but then we talked about more broadly public attitudes and public values. That's a problem. One thing we haven't really talked about has to do with cross-agency coordination, cross-agency cooperation. That's out there. One thing we haven't even touched on at all has to do with the role of climate change and how that's going to affect the grasslands, how it's going to affect the prairie dogs, how it's going to affect the efficacy of whatever we do. And whatever our agency does even be effective if the climate is changing? If we have more drought, hotter temperatures, shifts in the range of different species, that kind of thing. Okay? And we can talk, we're going to get into later in the semester, we'll talk more about sort of climate change issues and so forth. There are clearly a variety of issues about A, what to do about it, B, exactly what's happening and when and how much and what does it mean, okay? But in environmental law itself as a field, there has been sort of an embrace that there is actually such a thing as climate change happening in some kind of way, and that it has some degree of human cause or human impact. And so you see this out in the public law. There can be a lot of debates. People say, I don't believe it. Other people say, you have to believe it, and so on and so forth, okay? The U.S. Supreme Court, in the case Massachusetts versus EPA, all of the justices, even though they disagreed about what should happen, what the federal government should do, and so forth, all of the justices from left to right all said, hey, we accept the climate change is happening, the science that says the climate change is happening, and that humans are causing or contributing to it. Okay? So for the perspective, from the perspective of environmental law, sort of having the debate over whether it's even a phenomenon or not is not, and we've kind of passed that one. And besides that, if nothing else, your clients have passed that one. Businesses, insurance company, industries, everybody, as well as environmental groups. But clearly, clearly your private sector clients are all assuming that this is what's going on. So one of the questions that comes up for us in this particular case has to do with adaptation. And how can you help the ecosystems adapt to climate change? How can you manage them in a way that adapts? And then finally, several people have mentioned this before, resources. Resources is an issue. Funding, where's the money coming from? The personnel, the expertise, how's that going to work? And so those are also issues. We've talked quite a bit about the context, right? Talked about what the causes of the problem are. We talked about the environmental, social, and institutional context. I'm just sort of trying to define the problem. But one of the things that you would want to do is try to kind of list that out. Okay, list down those things. We're not going to kind of repeat all that and so forth. But you want to talk about why do we have these problems with the grasslands and the prairie dogs? What do we know about grasslands and prairie dogs and how they work? What do we know about society and how they're dealing with this in all of the different governmental and legal institutions? Okay, so what happens next is we're going to start. We have the facts, so the investigate facts part's already happened. What we're going to do next is now start getting into the law. We investigate the law part of it. What legal mechanisms are applicable to this problem, and how might we use them, and how might we analyze them in a way to help solve the problem. So that's where we're going next week. If you have any questions about the reading assignment, email me, let me know. I'll see you next Monday.